Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude, where I do trailer reactions, I react to YouTube videos, I review YouTube channels, occasionally I'll review a movie, but really, I just do whatever the hell I want. Hello everybody and welcome to Gene's Reviews from a regular dude, down in the basement. Today we got 5 strangest national park disappearances with backstories. This is from, I think, Amazing Top 5, so let's check this out. Top 5 unknowns.
National parks often provide relief from the busy, crowded urban world most people live in today. They're areas of natural beauty where people can relax and enjoy the wilderness. But that wilderness has a darker side that, without proper preparation, can lead to people being hurt, falling foul to unsavory people, or, most disturbing, people simply disappearing. There's not necessarily any sign of foul play, but despite significant search efforts, these missing people are never found. These are 5 people who vanished in national parks.
They are like huge areas, but still with no trace.
Number 5. Carllanders was an experienced mountaineer with ambitions of climbing to the top of the highest peak in every Californian county. He'd managed a few when he and 2 friends set out to climb Mount Shasta in May of 1999. It had snowed overnight, but that wasn't much of an issue. The mountain itself wasn't particularly a difficult climb, though its height could lead to altitude sickness. Usually, climbers set off from the 50-50 camp above the tree line in the early hours of the morning, but Carl and his friends had a later start time in mind. Carl was feeling unwell, but instead of delaying the climb, this prompted him to set off ahead of his friends. He left the camp at around 9 a.m. with plans of meeting his friends at Lake Helen. This is the last confirmed sighting of him. Around 30 minutes later, his friends began to follow him up the mountain. One turned back early on, leaving the second friend, a man named Milton, to catch up with Carl alone. When he reached the lake, Carl was nowhere to be seen. He asked a ranger if he'd seen anyone, and the ranger described speaking to an older man that matched Carl's description. The man was visible on the trail ahead, and Milton began to follow him, thinking it was his friend. However, after a short time following the hiker, Milton realized he was going too fast to be Carl, and he didn't think his clothing matched. Milton turned back and returned to the camp, thinking Carl must have turned back as well. When he realized Carl wasn't at the 50-50 camp, he and the second friend alerted authorities. Despite many searches of the mountain at the time and in the years since, Carl has never been found. It's likely he was suffering with dehydration, which, combined with the altitude, could have led to him getting disoriented and lost, later dying from exposure. However, if that is the case, how has his body never been found? It remains a mystery.
Okay, now that one, I don't think there's anything nefarious or I think he just maybe fell off of a cliff or something like that. It's such a huge area, Mount Shasta, that I could understand not ever finding him.
Number 4. George Pinka Jr. had been on a hike with a group from his church when he went missing from the top of Upper Yosemite Falls in 2011. The 30-year-old was in a group of around 20 people hiking up to the top of Yosemite Falls on June 17. The weather was pleasant and the trail itself is relatively well maintained and not difficult to hike. However, it's fairly steep and long and connects with other hiking trails. The group reached the top of the falls at around 2:40 p.m. Once at the top, they dispersed and planned to regroup to hike back to Yosemite Valley. It's not clear how long they were at the top of the falls, or where any of the hikers went during that time, but when they regrouped, George was not with them. They assumed George must have begun walking back down the trail alone, and it doesn't appear as if there was any significant search at the time. It wasn't until the group made it back to the valley that evening that they realized George wasn't back at the base and reported him missing. Around a dozen helicopters and more than 100 search and rescue workers searched the falls and surrounding trails over the following days. Around 70 square miles of rugged terrain was covered in the extensive search, but there was no sign of the missing hiker. After around a week, the search was scaled back due to a lack of clues about his whereabouts. Part of the issue may have been the confusion about when exactly George went missing. Officially, he was last seen when the group reached the top of the falls, and it was assumed he wandered off at some point while the group was dispersed. However, it's possible George didn't make it to the top of the falls at all. Not long after he was reported missing, George's cousin claimed he hadn't been feeling well due to the trek to the falls and turned back before. It was possible he took the wrong trail back and got lost in the park. If that's the case, it's possible the early search efforts were focused in the wrong place. Either way, there's been no sign of George since his disappearance, and his case has gone cold.
So they're searching for him all that time, and then they find out they were searching in the wrong place, and where he was and probably died, he could have been taken off by any kind of animal.
Number 3.
Or it could have been alien. Or Bigfoot.
The United States isn't the only country where national parks can become the last known locations for missing people. Countries all over the world face the problem of people disappearing in the wilderness, some to a greater extent than others. James Norman went missing in strange circumstances from West Cape Ho National Park in Australia in 2015. The 33-year-old and his friend had gone out to fish on Dunsky Beach on February 18. They both knew the area fairly well, and James was confident in the water, so when he decided to go for a swim, after drinking a cask of wine, neither were too worried. James swam to nearby Shelley Beach. His friend watched him reach the shore and walk along the beach and onto a rocky outcrop. After that, he disappeared from sight and hasn't been seen since. His friend reported him missing when he couldn't find James, and an extensive land and sea search took place. Police didn't believe there was any criminality involved, but were concerned for his safety and urged anyone to get in touch if they had any information. There were a few reported sightings at a nearby campsite, but police were unable to confirm whether this was really the missing man. Most believe it's likely James got back into the water, possibly in an attempt to swim back to his friend. Though a strong swimmer, the sea can be dangerous no matter how experienced someone is, so it's possible he was swept away from the beach. However, if this were the case, it seems unlikely that none of his remains would have come ashore. The area is known for shark sightings, particularly great whites. Though shark attacks are fairly rare, it's possible James was attacked, although again, there would likely be some kind of evidence for this. Some local to the area have a darker theory. It would have been difficult for the friend to have seen James on Shelley Beach without binoculars, and some suspect the mile-long swim in shark-infested waters would be unrealistic. The theory implies James never made it to shore in the first place, and something happened to him either on his swim to Shelley Beach or while he was still with his friend. Number 2. Christina Kaleka was not an experienced hiker or camper, but had decided to go with the small group of friends to the Rainbow Falls Provincial Park to enjoy a long weekend off work. The group of 4 young adults arrived at the park in Ontario, Canada around noon after setting up camp and taking a nap, and stayed up until around 4 a.m. They made a bonfire, enjoyed food, and chatted. At the time, it didn't seem as if there was anything out of the ordinary on Christina's mind. Despite the late night, Christina and a friend, Eddie, woke up at 6:30 a.m. Eddie was a friend from church and somebody Christina knew relatively well. Both wanted to go running, but Christina wanted to run along the park trails, while Eddie preferred the nearby highway. Instead of compromising, the pair split up. Eddie returned to camp an hour later, but Christina didn't come back. The group, which included Christina's cousin, reported her missing a few hours later. Since 2009, there have been multiple searches organized by both Ontario police and Christina's family. Hundreds of search and rescue workers searched the park and the nearby Lake Superior for any signs of her, with planes and even a submarine used at one point, but each search turned up nothing. There are 2 main theories as to what happened to Christina. The first and most obvious is that she got lost while wandering off the trail and possibly injured herself, or was attacked by one of the wild animals that calls the park its home. It seems unlikely that no one would have found any evidence of this in the many searches that took place, but it is possible, and cadaver dogs did indicate that they found human remains in the river at one point, though the water was too dangerous to search properly. The other darker theory is that Christina met with foul play. Christina's family did not believe anyone she went camping with would hurt her, and there's evidence she was at the campsite that day before she disappeared. Police repeatedly interviewed the 3 friends Christina was camping with, but nothing came from them. It's possible she may have run into someone else while jogging in the park and was taken out by an opportunistic attacker.
That one I have no idea.
Number 1.
Probably just got lost.
Millions of people visit Yellowstone National Park every year. The park covers almost 3,500 square miles, most of which is wilderness, and is known for its wildlife and geothermal features. More recently, it's become known as a hotspot for disappearances, but this isn't entirely accurate. The vast majority of people who go missing in the park are found relatively quickly, and most self-rescue, getting back on track without needing help from a search party. Sadly, 47-year-old Dan Campbell and his Australian shepherd dog, Freckles, are in the minority of people who go missing in the park and are never recovered. Dan went missing in April of 1991. He and his brothers had been saving up for a move from their home in Idaho to White Sulphur Springs. As part of that, Dan had been getting involved with what his brothers described as shady characters and engaging in illegal activity. On April 4th, 1991, Dan and Freckles were dropped off at the trailhead for Hellroaring Creek. He was allegedly planning to hike through to Jardine, Montana to pick up some elk antlers he'd collected and saved for later. Collecting elk antlers in the park was not legal, but would bring in thousands of dollars. Dan was reported missing 4 days later when he didn't arrive in Jardine. In the meantime, there had been severe snowfall, and even though Dan was an experienced outdoorsman, there was no worry that he may have been injured in the snow. An extensive air and land search began the following day, though snowstorms and avalanche warnings hindered operations. There was no sign of Dan or his dog, and his family and authorities began to believe something more sinister had occurred. Collecting antlers seemed like one of the most non-violent activities that could take place in a national park. The animals didn't.
You'd think so, but sometimes those criminals that are doing stuff to make money, they'll do anything to get money. Especially if drugs get involved.
Themselves naturally shed their horns, so there's little need for them to be killed in order for hunters to profit. However, the large sums of money involved has attracted people willing to protect their territory with semi-automatic weaponry. Yeah. They fear another hunter may have considered that Dan was trespassing on his territory and killed him to protect their trade, or that one of the other shady characters he was involved with committed the murder. Authorities have also suggested it's possible Dan may have willingly disappeared to start fresh somewhere new, though his family doesn't believe this is possible. Dan would be in his 70s now, and if he didn't willingly disappear, it's highly likely he passed away decades ago, though neither him nor his dog's remains have ever been found. Thank you guys so much for watching.
Well, that was interesting. 5 strangest national park disappearances with backstories. You guys ready for a joke? A Marine was deployed to Afghanistan. While he was there, he received a letter from his girlfriend. Dear John. When it starts out like that, it's not good. I can no longer continue our relationship. The distance between us is too great. I must confess that I have cheated on you twice, and this situation is not fair for either of us. I'm really sorry. Love, Elizabeth. P.S. Please return the picture you have of me. The Marine, his feelings hurt, asked his fellow Marines for any snapshots they had of mothers, sisters, girlfriends, cousins, ex-girlfriends, or aunts. After a while, he had obtained a sizable collection, so he stuffed all 35 of them into an envelope, including the picture of Elizabeth, along with his letter. Elizabeth, I can't quite remember which one you are. Please take your picture from the pile and return the rest. Take care, John. Thank you, everybody. Make sure you like, comment, subscribe, hashtag Mean Gene, all that fun stuff. And if you like this video, tell all your friends, leave a comment down below. And if you didn't like it, then just shut up. And I will see you next time.